The Nazca Lines are a group of very large geoglyphs formed by depressions or shallow incisions made in the soil of the Nazca Desert in southern Peru. They were created between 500 BC and 500 AD. Most lines run straight across the landscape, but there are also figurative designs of animals and plants, made up of lines. The individual figurative geoglyph designs measure between 0.4 and 1.1 kilometers, 0.2 and 0.7 mi, across. The combined length of all the lines is over 1,300 kilometers, 808 miles, and the group cover an area of about 50 square kilometers, 19 square miles. The lines are typically 10 to 15 centimeters, 4 to 6 in, deep. They were made by removing the top layer of reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles to reveal a yellow-gray subsoil. The width of the lines varies considerably, but over half are slightly over 1/3 meter, just over 1 foot, wide. In some places they may be only a foot, 30.5 centimeters, wide, and in others reach 6 feet 1.8 meters wide. Some of the Nazca Lines' form shapes are best seen from the air, 1,500 feet, 457 m, though they are visible from the surrounding foothills and other high places. The shapes are usually made from one continuous line. The largest ones are about 370 meters, 1,200 feet long. Because of its isolation in the dry, windless, stable climate of the plateau, the lines have mostly been preserved naturally. Extremely rare changes in weather may temporarily alter the general designs. As of 2012, the lines are said to have been deteriorating because of an influx of squatters inhabiting the lands. The figures vary in complexity. Hundreds are simple lines and geometric shapes, more than 70 are zoomorphic designs of animals such as a hummingbird, spider, fish, llama, jaguar, monkey, lizard, dog, and a human. Other shapes include trees and flowers. Scholars differ in interpreting the purpose of the designs, but in general, they ascribe religious significance to them. They were designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1994. The high, arid plateau stretches more than 80 kilometers 50 miles between the towns of Nazca and Palpas on the Pampas de Jumana, approximately 400 kilometers 250 miles south of Lima, roughly matching the main P1's Panamericana Sur. The main concentration is in a 10 by 4 kilometers, 6 miles by 2 miles, rectangle, south of San Miguel de la Pascana hamlet. In this area, the most notable geoglyphs are visible. Although some local geoglyphs resemble Paracas motifs, scholars believe the Nazca Lines were created by the Nazca culture. In 1994, they were designated as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The first published mention of the Nazca Lines was by Pedro Cieza de Leon in his book of 1553, and he mistook them for trail markers. In 1586, Luis Monzon reported having seen ancient ruins in Peru, including the remains of roads. Although the lines were partially visible from the nearby hills, the first to report them were Peruvian military and civilian pilots. In 1927, the Peruvian archaeologist Toribio Mejia Zesp spotted them while he was hiking through the foothills. He discussed them at a conference in Lima in 1939. Paul Kosak, an American historian from Long Island University, is credited as the first scholar to study the Nazca Lines at length. In Peru in 1940-41 to study ancient irrigation systems, he flew over the lines and realized one was in the shape of a bird. Another chance observation helped him see how lines converged at the winter solstice in the southern hemisphere. He began to study how the lines might have been created, as well as to try to determine their purpose. He was joined by archaeologist Richard P. Shuttle from the United States, and Maria Reich, a German mathematician and archaeologist from Lima, to help determine the purpose of the Nazca Lines. They proposed one of the earliest reasons for the existence of the figures, to be markers on the horizon to show where the sun and other celestial bodies rose on significant dates. Archaeologists, historians, and mathematicians have all tried to determine the purpose of the lines. Determining how they were made has been easier than determining why they were made. Scholars have theorized the Nazca people could have used simple tools and surveying equipment to construct the lines. Archaeological surveys have found wooden stakes in the ground at the end of some lines, which supports this theory. One such stake was carbon dated and was the basis for establishing the age of the design complex. Refuting the hypothesis of Erich von Daniken that the lines had to have been created by ancient astronauts, prominent skeptic Joe Nickel has reproduced the figures using tools and technology available to the Nazca people. Scientific American called his work remarkable in its exactness when compared to the existing lines. With careful planning and simple technologies, Nickel proved that a small team of people could recreate even the largest figures within days, without any aerial assistance. Most of the lines are formed on the ground by a shallow trench with a depth between 10 and 15 centimeters, 4 and 6 in. Such trenches were made by removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the surface of the Nazca Desert. When this gravel is removed, the light-colored clay earth exposed in the bottom of the trench produces lines and contrasts sharply in color and tone with the surrounding land surface. This sublayer contains high amounts of lime which, with the morning mist, hardens to form a protective layer that shields the lines from winds, thereby preventing erosion. The Nazca drew several hundred simple, but huge, curvilinear animal and human figures by this technique. In total, the earthwork project is huge and complex. The area encompassing the lines is nearly 450 square kilometers, 170 square miles, and the largest figures can span nearly 370 meters, 1,200 feet. Some figures have been measured. The hummingbird is 93 meters, 305 feet long, the condor is 134 meters, 440 feet, the monkey is 93 by 58 m, 305 by 190 feet, and the spider is 47 meters, 154 feet. The extremely dry, windless, and constant climate of the Nazca region has preserved the lines well. This desert is one of the driest on Earth and maintains a temperature near 25 degrees Celsius, 77 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. The lack of wind has helped keep the lines uncovered and visible. The discovery of two new small figures was announced in early 2011 by a Japanese team from Yamagata University. One of these resembles a human head and is dated to the early period of Nazca culture or earlier, and the other, undated, is an animal. In March 2012, the university announced a new research center would be opened at the site in September 2012 to study the area for the next 15 years. The team has been conducting field work there since 2006, when it had found approximately 100 new geoglyphs. A June 2019 article in Smithsonian Magazine describes recent work by a team of 3 Japanese researchers who identified/re-identified some of the birds depicted. The Paracas culture is considered the precursor that influenced the development of the Nazca Lines. In 2018, drones used by archaeologists revealed many geoglyphs in the Palpas province that are being assigned to the Paracas culture. Many predate the associated Nazca Lines by 1,000 years. Some demonstrate a significant difference in the subjects and locations, such as some being on hillsides. Their co-discoverer, Peruvian archaeologist Luis Jaime Castillo Boners, indicates that many of these newly discovered geoglyphs represent warriors. Anthropologists, ethnologists, and archaeologists have studied the ancient Nazca culture to try to determine the purpose of the lines and figures. One hypothesis is that the Nazca people created them to be seen by deities in the sky. Paul Kosak and Maria Reich advanced a purpose related to astronomy and cosmology. As has been common in other cultures, the lines were intended to act as a kind of observatory, to point to the places on the distant horizon where the sun and other celestial bodies rose or set in the solstices. Many prehistoric indigenous cultures in the Americas and elsewhere constructed earthworks that combined such astronomical sighting with their religious cosmology, as did the late Mississippian culture at Cahokia and other sites in present-day United States. Another example is Stonehenge in England. Gerald Hawkins and Anthony Avini, experts in archaeoastronomy, concluded in 1990 that the evidence was insufficient to support such an astronomical explanation. Maria Reich asserted that some or all of the figures represented constellations. By 1998, Phyllis B. Podluga, a protege of Reich and senior astronomer at the Adler Planetarium in Chicago, had concluded that the animal figures were representations of heavenly shapes. According to the New York Times, she contends they are not shapes of constellations, but of what might be called counter-constellations, the irregularly shaped dark patches within the twinkling expanse of the Milky Way. Anthony Avini criticized her work for failing to account for all the details. Alberto Rosell Castro, 1977, proposed a multifunctional interpretation of the geoglyphs. He classified them into 3 groups. The first appeared to be tracks connected to aggregation in field division, the second are lines that are axis connected with mounds and cairns, and the third was linked to astronomical interpretations. In 1985, archaeologist Johann Reinhard published archaeological, ethnographic, and historical data demonstrating that worship of mountains and other water sources predominated in Nazca religion and economy from ancient to recent times. He theorized that the lines and figures were part of religious practices involving the worship of deities associated with the availability of water. which directly related to the success and productivity of crops. He interpreted the lines as sacred paths leading to places where these deities could be worshipped. The figures were symbols representing animals and objects meant to invoke the aid of the deities in supplying water. The precise meanings of many of the individual geoglyphs remain unknown. Henry Sterlin, a Swiss art historian specializing in Egypt and the Middle East, published a book in 1983 linking the Nazca Lines to the production of ancient textiles that archaeologists have found wrapping mummies of the Paracas culture. He contended that the people may have used the lines and trapezes as giant, primitive looms to fabricate the extremely long strings and wide pieces of textiles typical of the area. According to his theory, the figurative patterns, smaller and less common, were meant only for ritualistic purposes. This theory is not widely accepted, although scholars have noted similarities in patterns between the textiles and the Nazca Lines. They interpret these similarities as arising from the common culture. The first systematic field study of the geoglyphs was made by Marcus Reindl and Johnny Quadrado Island. Since 1996, they have documented and excavated more than 650 sites. They compared the iconography of the lines to ceramics of the cultures. As archaeologists, they believe that the figurative motifs of geoglyphs can be dated to having been made between 600 and 200 BCE. Based on the results of geophysical investigations and the observation of geological faults, Johnson argued that some geoglyphs followed the paths of aquifers from which aqueducts, or puquios, collected water. Nicola Massini and Giuseppe Orefici have conducted research in Pampa da Atarco, at about 10 kilometers south of Pampa de Nazca, which they believe reveals a spatial, functional and religious relationship between these geoglyphs and the temples of Kawachi. In particular, they investigated using remote sensing techniques and found 5 groups of geoglyphs, each of them characterized by a specific motif and shape, and associated with a distinct function. They identified a ceremonial one, characterized by meandering motifs. Another is related to calendrical purpose, as proved by the presence of radial centers aligned along the directions of winter solstice and equinox sunset. As have earlier scholars, the 2 Italians believe that the geoglyphs were the venues of events linked to the agriculture calendar. These also served to strengthen social cohesion among various groups of pilgrims, sharing common ancestors and religious beliefs. Other theories were that the geometric lines could indicate water flow or irrigation schemes, or be a part of rituals to summon water. The spiders, birds, and plants may be fertility symbols. It also has been theorized that the lines could act as an astronomical calendar. Phyllis Podluga, senior astronomer at the Adler Planetarium and a protege of Reich, performed computer-aided studies of star alignments. She asserted the giant spider figure as an anamorphic diagram of the constellation Orion. She further suggested that 3 of the straight lines leading to the figure were used to track the changing declinations of the 3 stars of Orion's belt. In a critique of her analysis, Dr. Anthony Favini noted she did not account for the other 12 lines of the figure. He commented generally on her conclusions, saying, "I really had trouble finding good evidence to back up what she contended." Podluga never laid out the criteria for selecting the lines she chose to measure, nor did she pay much attention to the archaeological data Clarkson and Silverman had unearthed. Her case did little justice to other information about the coastal cultures, save applying, with subtle contortions, Urton's representations of constellations from the highlands. As historian Jaquetta Hawks might ask, was she getting the Pampa she desired? Jim Woodman theorized that the Nazca Lines could not have been made without some form of flight to observe the figures properly. Based on his study of available technology, he suggests a hot air balloon was the only possible means of flight at the time of construction. To test this hypothesis, Woodman made a hot air balloon using materials and techniques he understood to have been available to the Nazca people. The balloon flew, after a fashion. Most scholars have rejected Woodman's thesis as ad hoc, because of the lack of any evidence of such balloons. People trying to preserve the Nazca Lines are concerned about threats of pollution and erosion caused by deforestation in the region. The lines themselves are superficial, they are only 10 to 30 centimeters deep and could be washed away. Nazca has only ever received a small amount of rain. But now there are great changes to the weather all over the world. The lines cannot resist heavy rain without being damaged. After flooding and mudslides in the area in mid-February 2007, Mario Oliquia Aquaich, archaeological resident from Peru's National Institute of Culture, and a team of specialists surveyed the area. He said, Mudslides and heavy rains did not appear to have caused any significant damage to the Nazca Lines. He noted that the nearby Southern Pan American Highway did suffer damage, and the damage done to the roads should serve as a reminder to just how fragile these figures are. In 2012, squatters occupied land in the area, damaging a Nazca-era cemetery and allowing their pigs to have access to some of the land. In 2013, machinery used in a limestone quarry was reported to have destroyed a small section of a line and caused damage to another. In December 2014, Greenpeace activists irreparably damaged the Nazca Lines while setting up a banner within the lines of one of the famed geoglyphs. The activists damaged an area around the hummingbird by grinding rocks into the sandy soil. Access to the area around the lines is strictly prohibited and special shoes must be worn to avoid damaging the UN World Heritage Site. Greenpeace claimed the activists were absolutely careful to protect the Nazca Lines. This is contradicted by video and photographs showing the activists wearing conventional shoes, i.e. not special protective shoes, while walking on the site. Greenpeace has apologized to the Peruvian people, but Luis Jaime Castillo, Peru's Vice Minister of Cultural Heritage, called the apology a joke, because Greenpeace initially refused to identify the vandals or accept responsibility. Culture Minister Diana Alvarez Calderon said that evidence gathered during an investigation by the government would be used as part of a legal suit against Greenpeace. The damage done is irreparable and the apologies offered by the environmental group aren't enough, she said at a news conference. Facing increasing pressure, Greenpeace later released the identities of 4 of the activists involved. One of the activists, Wolfgang Sadek, was eventually fined and given a suspended prison sentence for his role in the incident. The Greenpeace incident also directed attention to other damage to geoglyphs outside of the World Heritage Area caused in 2012 and 2013 by off-road vehicles of the Dakar Rally, which is visible from satellite imagery. In January 2018, an errant truck driver was arrested, but later released for lack of evidence indicating any intent other than simple error. He had damaged 3 of the geoglyphs by leaving substantial tire marks across an area of approximately 150 by 350 feet, 46 m by 107 m. Not far from the Nazca Lines in the province of Palpas, Peru, archaeologists have newly discovered more than 25 geoglyphs carved into the desert hillsides. The glyphs are commonly known as the Paracas geoglyphs. These glyphs are considered by experts to be hundreds, if not at least 1,000 years older than the Nazca Lines. The glyphs were built by the ancient Peruvian Indian culture of Paracas. This is the same culture that created the well-known geoglyph known as the Paracas candelabra. Band of Holes. Blythe intaglios. Celestial mechanics. History of Peru. Iperu. List of archaeoastronomical sites by country. Maryland Bridges. Simone Weisbard. Tourism in Peru. UFO religions. Uffington Whitehorse.